6 young men are awaiting execution on death row in Pretoria, South Africa. They were given death sentences by the white-run courts because they dared to defy the most brutal system of race discrimination. Apartheid? It's apartheid. Are you all part of all this?
Yeah.
What's apartheid then?
Apartheid is the official policy of the South African government, which segregates the white people from the black people. Basically legislates that white people have privilege in South Africa, and black people are oppressed and exploited.
And, you know, I'm sort of hearing things now that, as you say, I never knew happened.
Well, no, because if you go there on holiday, you'll never see the real what's really happening there. All you'll see is swimming pools, you know, white people. You might see a few sort of black people servants.
Yeah.
You won't be able to go to a black area of South Africa because you're white. We too in South Africa cannot meet because he's white and I'm black. I need a permit to come to my house. It's like you going to Scotland. You can't go to Scotland because what will happen is you will have to have permission to go there.
Yeah.
When you grow up as a child in South Africa, you immediately realize that you are different from another child, a white child, even another black child, because there are areas where you can't go to, there are parks you can't play on, there are schools you can't go to, there are buses you can't ride on, and trains you can't ride on. And then suddenly when you start questioning and asking, but why is this? You're confronted with this whole reality that this is apartheid.
I don't know how many people here realise that in a country where there's 22 million blacks and 4 million whites and professes to be a democracy, that the democracy is for whites only, and there's a whites-only parliament in which only the whites are allowed to elect people, the only people allowed to vote. Blacks are denied a vote.
All right. Now, if it's so horrible in South Africa, right, how come there's a black cricket team over there, the West Indies? I mean, if it's all that horrible, surely they wouldn't be allowed there, would they?
Oh, well, you must
as honorary
understand.
whites.
It's what?
They're being treated as honorary whites.
They can't be whites, they're black.
They're not. They've got honorary white status. That means they don't have to carry a pass, but they have to be accompanied if they say they go out on the streets while they're there, they have to be accompanied by somebody who's with the tour and organising it, so that they don't accidentally get arrested and mistaken for a South African black and thrown into prison for not having a pass with them. The tour has been designed by South Africa so it can show the world that, look, we're changing, we're having this multiracial cricket, we're even inviting black teams here, when, in fact, just on sport, the South African Minister of Sport himself admitted last year that only 1% of sport in South Africa is actually mixed between the races. The rest of it remains white sport, black sport, coloured sport, put into its little different racial boxes.
How far away is South Africa?
6,000 miles.
What's it got to do with us?
It's got a lot to do with us. I mean, I'm a member of the Anti Apartheid movement. All the people with us are. Because we want people in Britain to be concerned about what's happening in South Africa. It's not just a country 6,000 miles away, but the apartheid system's actually sustained by British companies investing in South Africa. And
South Africa was a part of the British Commonwealth, wasn't it?
It was part of the Commonwealth. It came out in 1960, but although it's no longer part of the Commonwealth, Britain still has a great many interests there. South Africa is an immensely wealthy country, but wealth goes with the colour of your skin. If you're white, then you can expect to be wealthy. You can expect a very high standard of living, and if you're black, you will be poor.
It can be traumatic because you see quite a lot of things like your parents not being able to feed you properly, not send you to a school which you want to go. You're confined to a specific area, and these are the realities of apartheid.
But I think we can only really get some idea about what apartheid would mean if we could try and imagine a similar situation in this country where we had a racial minority government which deprived the majority of people in this country of all human rights.
Hey, white boy! Yeah, you, round the back. No dogs, blacks only. Can't you read the notice? This is a black man's country. Yeah, I'm talking about this country here, Great Britain, a black man's country. So if you whites want to eat in a restaurant like this, round the back with a pig swill. Now move! Before I move you. Yes, boss. Yes, boss, I hear you say. Just you remember who is boss.
Apartheid is a form of racism which exists in South Africa and nowhere else in the world, where racial discrimination is made part of the laws of the country, so that all black people in South Africa are discriminated against purely because they're black. And everybody is divided into certain racial groups, which governs for the rest of their lives from what they're entitled or allowed to do.
I, for instance, in Cape Town, I'm classified as a Cape Coloured. That is to say that my parentage had some European grandfather somewhere. Now you can get a complex situation where you are called a Cape Malay because your great-grandmother, grandfather came from Malaysia. Or you could be other coloured, what they call, and other coloured. I don't know how they classify that.
What is your classification? Are you a white or a pink? You look like a white to me. And your woman here, she looks like a pink. She's your wife, you say, and white. Well, she looks like a pink to me. As pink a piece of pork as I've ever seen. Look at that wavy hair. That's not white hair. Yeah, definitely a pink. So your marriage is illegal. Take him away. Charge him under the Immorality Act.
Apartheid is probably the most evil form in the world. It's something tantamount to what happened in Nazi Germany. They're trying to create very much a system whereby you have a white, so-called Aryan race. And this is quite clearly seen in the intermarriage rules and laws, whereby they don't want the white people to be so-called becoming pure. They wish to have a very clear white race.
What happens when we are still at school, when you reach the age of 16, that's the time when you've got to carry a pass, and then you have been taken to a what you call Bantu commissioner, where you're going to be given this book with your picture and the so-called tribe that you belong to, and then the date of birth and the place where you stay. And then after you've finished your school, you go and look for a job. You need to have this with you in order for your boss to put a stamp in, and then at the end of every month, you've got to go to your boss for him to sign. And if, for instance, you don't get your reference book signed by your boss, you can be arrested for not having the signature of your boss in it.
Hey boy, show me a pass. London is a restricted area. All whites must carry a pass at all times. You have a right to go anywhere in your own country you think. This is not your country. You non-blacks are only here to work. That is why we let you out of the homelands. You have a right to govern yourself now. You whites are not capable of governing yourself. Well, look at the mess you made in Europe. Millions tortured, maimed, killed. You're like little children. Would you allow a 7 or 8-year-old child to rule themselves? You pass!
The way the police will approach you is that the approach is always hostile. I mean, you can get maybe a slap from him. I mean, he can sort of give you a punch and say, yeah, where's your pass? Or just jog you while you're walking without maybe realizing that they're coming. Or sometimes they'll just say, while you're walking down the street, say, whoa, stop you. And then from there they'll force you to produce the reference book And then if you don't reproduce it at that moment, you get arrested and handcuffed.
The Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa, which is very much the church of the state, condones apartheid. It condones it in all its forms, to the extent that the Bible for the black people had to be rewritten, and the blacks had to call God boss rather than God. Black people generally in the Dutch Reformed Church can't go to the same church as the white people. They have their own separate churches.
When you got into the church where I went, which was a Catholic church, you found that the blacks were sitting on one side and the whites were sitting on the other side. And at the same time, the priest was talking about love thy neighbor and all this type of thing. And finding that when you get outside, some of the congregation would be policemen, and that they would actually be arresting you afterwards, asking you for your permit to be in that area. And this was the biggest contradiction that I found under apartheid when it came to how religion, for instance, was being practiced in South Africa. Just next to our own school, the black school was a white school, and that was a white Catholic school. And next to us was the black Catholic school. I went to the black Catholic school. And you ask your teachers, but why can't I go to their school? And they say, well, you can't. The government says you can't.
But you whites are always complaining. 10 times as much spent on black education, you say. Why spend more on whites? Your brains are not capable of learning anymore. 'Tis a scientifically proven fact. Health? Why spend more on whites? Half your children are dead before the age of 5, you say. Well, there are too many of you anyway. Britain is swamped with whites.
We have South Africa pioneering heart transplants, whilst at the same time people are dying of diseases that were wiped out in Britain in the Middle Ages almost.
There was one case where a woman had had trouble having her child, and all the nurses in the hospital were white, and it just happened that the only doctor on duty was coloured. The woman died because it was not possible for a coloured doctor to give orders to white nurses, and they had to wait until they could get some coloured nurses to work under him.
But there's none of this in the holiday brochures, because I've read them, because I was thinking of going there on holiday, and it seems wildlife and beautiful wet.
Yeah, but you see, if you go to, say, a place like Sun City, where many British actors and many
is that the South African Las Vegas?
Yeah,
it's
the red light city of South Africa, where white and black can sleep together and so on, where you find that these people are paid thousands of pounds to go there.
One might be surprised that any white South African should choose to leave South Africa, because there is this apparently very luxurious standard of living, but I suppose it really depends on your priorities and whether you consider your standard of living the most important thing in your life. As far as I'm concerned, it's really the quality of your life that is the most important thing, and that doesn't only involve material goods. Well, I think for most white South Africans there's this feeling of living under this threat, being threatened by something nameless. There's very much a attitude of keep the doors locked, bar the windows, buy safety devices, put fences up around your houses, get safety alarms. Just this general feeling of being under threat of invasion or attack, and this breeds great feeling of insecurity. There's real gun mania. South Africa's got incredibly high figures of for whites owning guns. Blacks, on the whole, aren't allowed to own guns, whereas among whites, it's nowadays a very common thing to own a gun and just to carry it around with you, just in case the threat, this nameless threat, actually materializes. The South African army exists to defend this systematic exploitation, and it was really a pretty simple choice not to go into the army.
And when I was called up to protect the white situation and the white privileged lifestyle, I could, because the comforts that the black people encounter are just so marginal compared to those of the white, to fight to uphold this poverty amongst the black people, that I thought was completely and wrong. And I decided that the liberation movements were completely justified in fighting against the system, and that me, as a South African soldier, would be acting as a terrorist.
The white government in South Africa has decided that 85%, 87% of the land, all the white area on this map, belongs to the whites, and that the remaining 13% belongs to the Africans, the vast majority of the population. And, for example, this blue area is one of the Bantustans, or homelands, but it's not even one single landmass. You can see it's 7 separate areas. What happens is that somebody perhaps who's born in Soweto will be declared by the South African regime to be actually a citizen of Bophuthatswana or Transkei, one of the other homelands. And all their rights of citizenship in the country where they're actually born, South Africa, are withdrawn and denied. The purpose and function of the Homelands policy is twofold. It's firstly to try and present to the world an idea that South Africa is changing and that it is somehow giving independence to black people in their own particular little parts of South Africa. And it's also a system which provides for white South Africa a constant pool of labour, so that when the white South African industry requires black workers, it can call on workers in the homelands because there's no job opportunities there for black people. And at a time when industry doesn't require any more black workers, they can simply be shipped back there with the state having no responsibilities to provide for them.
People who live in these areas have got are living under very worse conditions, because in the first place, these homelands are situated in the most arid parts and infertile parts of the country. And the people are just living on subsistence. The crops that they are growing cannot feed the whole population in these homelands. Therefore, the men has to come to the white areas where the industries, the mines, the farms are. The children grow up without knowing their fathers. And in some occasions, if the fathers are coming back from work in the mines and so on, the children treat them as strangers. And I'm sure that any father who is going back and face his child and be regarded as a stranger by his child, it has got effect on him.
Come on, get out! Dust and the stink. Come on, get out, you and your unky kids. God, these white people stink. Strange food, smelly bodies, and the way they try to hang on to this little hover when they're being evicted. The way they look at me, I really hate. All sullen and defiant. Could smash their brains in. Woman, get your little pig away from me. It's a good thing. Bringing the bulldozers in.
I saw bulldozers coming and standing in front of the houses. People's property were just loaded onto trucks and their houses were bulldozed. I can still recall I was standing watching what they were doing, and it was really terrible to me. It was heartbreaking to see our house being bulldozed and that we have to move. There were times that people were still inside houses, and then the bulldozers will just come, and people were running out of the houses, screaming, crying, but they didn't care. They were just bulldozing the houses, and people were left standing outside with houses laying flat. People were throwing stones on the trucks, on the bulldozers, because it was the only means they could show. And as I've told you, in the first removal, people were demonstrating. They started a peaceful demonstration, and the answer was they were shot at, and 40 people were killed, and many others were wounded.
In most cases, people who protest in that way are usually arrested, in fact detained indefinitely without trial, or they are shot on the spot, or they are beaten, charged with batons and sticks by the police, or they are fired with tear gas.
In 1976, in Soweto, which is a black so-called township, it's actually a very large city of over 1 million people just outside Johannesburg, there was an uprising of the students, school students, and there were children from the age of 8 upwards involved in the demonstrations, protesting about the racist education that they were given. It resulted in a massive overreaction by the South African police. They simply opened fire on unarmed protesting school kids. In the end, over 1,000 were shot dead. Exact numbers will never be known because the South African regime attempted to suppress and hide what had happened.
What's this about?
Oh, this is about, these are three, this is one of the ANC 6, which
these 6
got
guys?
in the leaflet.
Yeah.
Who have been sentenced to death in South Africa. They were students who left South Africa after Soweto and the riots, where 1,000 school children were killed, and they went to join the ANC to fight and train to fight in exile to liberate their country.
The ANC is the oldest liberation movement in Africa. It was formed 1912, 8th of January. And since then, the ANC has been mobilizing the people as a whole. And this has been the basic strategy, that it is the mobilization of all the people of South Africa, irrespective of race or class or color or whatever. The ANC 6 are really 6 young people who, during the Soweto uprisings, fought on the streets against Bantu education, against the whole system of apartheid and racism, and who ultimately had to leave the country. They left South Africa because their aspirations could not be fulfilled there. They couldn't find what they were looking for, and that is a democratic society.
I've just noticed that 2 of them, Anthony Tsotsobi, and Johan Shabangu, they were nicked, well, they were sentenced to death on 19th of August 1981.
Oh yes.
That's what?
18 months ago.
18 months ago. Why aren't they Why haven't they been hung? I mean, that's what's going to happen, is it? They're going to get hung?
The reason why they haven't been hung is because there has been a big campaign to stop the hangings, you know. And as long as that's sustained and more people are involved in it, it's going to be more and more difficult.
In South Africa?
In South Africa to some extent, and internationally. There are a great many political prisoners in South Africa. We estimate something over 500 people who've actually been sentenced for political crimes, plus at any given time between 100 and 300 people who are detained without charge on political suspicions. The treatment of the detainees is very, very bad. Recently there's been a lot of evidence coming out treated.
On the first occasion that I was in detention, I was 16 years old, and I was detained for protesting against the band education system, for lifting up a placard and saying no to band education system. On each occasion that I was detained, that I was subjected to a brutal torture by the security police. They assaulted me physically, sticks, fists, and open hands, and kicked me. And they also used electric shocks. They took, they wrapped a wet towel around my face, and they inserted some wires, electric wires, underneath the towel. And they handcuffed me with my hands behind my back, and they leg ironed me, and they tied electric wires on the chains, on the leg irons, and on handcuffs. And they would periodically set the electric machine on to shock me, and they would do at intervals of about 3 minutes or so. And I would scream with nobody stopping them from doing it, and until I promised to write something. And when they stopped it, I had nothing to write because there was nothing that I could say. And they took me to a more advanced type of electric shocking device. So I could feel it, that it was a more advanced one, because they shocked me until I was unconscious. And it was only then that they stopped shocking me, and they took me back to my cell, where they locked me up alone. I was kept in solitary confinement for about 9 months.
The sort of conditions that political prisoners face are very, very bad, and it's something that should be of concern to anybody here. People might be interested to know the manacles that are used on political prisoners are made in Birmingham. Almost a year ago, the first white person to die in detention was a man called Dr. Neil Aggott, who was a trade union organiser. He was deprived of sleep. He was physically beaten to the point where he was incredibly. People did see him being taken in and out of his cell and have given statements about the sort of condition he was in.
If you look at the death of people like Neil Aggott, who, because of his total devotion to what he thinks is the kind of thing that he wants, the kind of thing that he knows that the black people also want, he involved himself in that. And that's an indicator to the fact that it's not each and every white person that is in agreement with the kind of society that is present inside South Africa. So therefore, we don't see ourselves as facing white people face to face. So we sort of liberated from the racial hatred.
Well, people in Britain should, I think, be concerned about what's happening in South Africa for a number of reasons. Perhaps firstly because Britain, as one of the major colonising powers in Africa, one of the countries which during the 18th and 19th centuries rushed to grab land in Africa, laid down the basis for what is now apartheid, laid down the laws which made racial discrimination and racial oppression what is now apartheid in South Africa. But not just because of what happened in the past, but because Britain today invests enormously in South Africa. We have an estimated investment figure of £7 billion spent from Britain in the South African economy. And British money is invested in South Africa not by accident, but precisely because of apartheid and because the very poor wages paid to black workers mean very high profits for the British companies investing there.
So what we're fighting for a purely liberated society, a purely non-racial society where everybody has a say in the decision-making in that country.
Well, what I would like young people to do is to join the anti-apartheid movement, show their solidarity with the suffering people of South Africa and Namibia. I would like them to become aware of the close collaboration which exists between Britain and South Africa. I would like them to stop buying South African products which are sold freely in supermarkets and in the greengrocers. These are the type of actions we would like them to take. We would also like them to take up political issues such as the young people who are languishing in prison, who are about to be executed. We want them to take them up, the ANC 6. We want them to focus the ANC is doing in South Africa to fight for a free and democratic country.
People have the right to determine their own destiny. These rights must be given to the people of South Africa, for there shall be no mercy for those who uphold these racist policies. No tear shall be shed for their blood, for they are a wicked, evil people, illegal invaders, and they must be driven away. Like the wind blows the sands of the shores, so must they be driven away. This is the true voice of the people. Don't talk to them. Don't be them friend. No matter if you're black or if you are white, no apartheid, no apartheid. Listen, don't play with them. Do not trade with them. No matter if you're Church of Christ or Methodist, no racist, no racist. Free South Africa. They better free South Africa. Got too many children dying down there when people in the West them just not care. Free South Africa. They better free South Africa. Cause everybody need them human rights. The big world better come view them sites. Free South Africa. They better free South Africa. Illegal occupation, it is killing this free nation. They better start repatriation and give us liberation, because we don't want no sellout. You see, we don't need the West. Cause right now we are demanding freedom, because freedom is the best. We don't want no more tribulation. I curse this situation. See, right now, as we are fight for self-determination. Free South Africa. They better free South Africa. Got too many children dying down there when people in the West them just not care. Free South Africa. They better free South Africa. Cause everybody need them human rights. The big world better come view them sites. Free South Africa. They better free South Africa. Cause everybody need them human rights. Yes, everybody need them human rights.
My name is Julian Bahula. I'm born in South Africa, and I play drums of our ancestors, and these drums are called Malombo drums. They speak and they talk. And the piece I'm bound to play now is dedicated for those who died for the struggle in South Africa, and it's called we shall be free.